Hello there, and welcome into the World Cricket Show here on Global Cricket Radio. I'm your host, Andrew McLean, and I'm joined, as always, by Rob Finley. Rob, how are you doing? I suppose you're fairly happy with an Australian victory over New Zealand over the weekend?
Absolutely. Good to be with you, Andy, and it's great to see the Aussies romp home a little bit quicker than I would have expected. So a lot to go through in a game that ebbed and flowed a little bit, but revealed a whole bunch of sort of sub-stories that we can touch on.
For sure. I mean, from New Zealand's perspective, I guess the drama, if we can call it that, started before the match with a very sudden and unexpected retirement by Neil Wagner. Came about in a bit of bizarre fashion, really. I mean, he had played the previous Test match. From memory, I think he played the second Test match against South Africa, and then was told by the selectors that he wasn't going to be chosen for the Wellington Test, and was released from the squad. Although he wasn't really released because he was still bowling in the nets,
Yeah,
and was
strange.
on the field at different points. But he just, I mean, you can only read between the lines. But he made the decision to retire, which just seemed pretty bizarre from my perspective. With still another Test match to go in the series in Christchurch. But what did you make of the whole thing, of the scenario first and foremost?
It sort of seemed like he was given some very quick news that he had to make a quick decision on, and maybe he felt like with the calendar coming up over the next year or so that he just wasn't going to play a role, and he wanted to go out with a bit of dignity. But who knew, or maybe they did know, what would transpire in the following sort of 5 days or 4 days. So it was very strange. I mean, from an Aussie perspective, it was a bowler that we remember well from that 2019, I think it was, here when they came out, and he was really dominant and forceful, and one of those sort of bowlers and personalities that we would love on our own side. So it was a surprise, and the commentary here, as New Zealand crumbled through this test as each session went on, was, geez, what would Wagner have done if he was playing? So it was definitely a quick surprise for everyone, I think.
Yeah, and some of the tributes. I mean, I read a lot last week, obviously, because it was sort of the big story before the match started. I read a lot of glowing tributes to Wagner. I barely remember a negative comment about him, but I read one news article from Australia. I think it was might have even been on the Australian cricket.com website, possibly. And then there was about 200 odd people. This is on Facebook, I think it was. There was about 200 odd comments, and I sort of started reading through them all. I was just like, wow, this guy's so respected in Australia. I was like, that doesn't really happen very often to Kiwis.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we love that kind of fiery temperament. We love the fact that he wanted to stand up to the team. He played the underdog that broke through and sort of got under our skin. So that's why we respect him so much. And the fact is he originally South African? Am I right in thinking that, Andy?
Yeah, he's from Johannesburg.
It just gives him another edge. So I think it sort of bonded us all together around him. And so, yeah, we wish him well, but I wonder if he's still got a role to play, Andy. Could he get a recall, or is it someone else who's going to come back in for this next test?
Yeah. Well, this is the bizarre aspect of it, of course, is that he retires but then doesn't leave. He was still there. I don't know if he stayed for the whole match or not, but he was still there. He was still pictured on the field at some points. And then the press conference at the end of the match yesterday, Tim Southey was posed a question about, well, would he consider Neil Wagner coming back into the team? And he was a bit cagey. Well, I wouldn't say cagey over. That's probably the wrong word. But for a guy that's just retired, I mean, you'd probably answer, well, he's retired, so how would he come back in? But that's not what Southey said at all. But I just read now, Rob, that I don't think Wagner will be chosen, because the thing that has happened is that Will O'Rourke, who played in the match at Wellington, he's been ruled out with injury, and his place has been taken by a debutant from Wellington called Ben Sears. So no, I don't think Wagner would be there. And I also just don't think Gary Stead's the type of guy to say, oh well, I got that wrong. Yeah, I'll give Neil a call. It just would have been a bit weird, I think. But I must say though, Rob, it's a second retirement in a couple of years of let's say greats of the New Zealand game, which just didn't sit comfortably with me, because a similar thing happened with Ross Taylor 2 seasons ago. And I know there was a statement put out, or there was a news story that Ross did, saying that retiring at the end of the Bangladesh series 2 summers ago made sense, which meant that he didn't play in the Test series against South Africa, a few weeks after that. And he ended up playing his final international for New Zealand in a nondescript one-day international against the Netherlands, while all his mates were at the IPL. So I was just like,
I guess
something doesn't make sense about that.
I think these days, with all the schedules and the way that the sport is relatively ruthless, you don't get to pick your beautiful exit anymore, right? You're not going to. I mean, I think your favourite man, Dave Warner, probably had the best exit of anyone. He called his exit a year early. He made it to the Pakistan Test, the SCG, hit a ton in that series, and probably went out in the way that he wanted to. Whereas most others don't have that luxury. Even someone as amazing and as good as Ross Taylor, who I think was incredible, and seeing Kane Williamson probably reach the last year or two of his career, what's his exit going to be as well? So yeah, it's a clunky way to go out.
Although, since you mentioned David Warner, I did notice in that article that I just referred to on the Australian website, there was one comment that said, "Note to Warner: this is how you retire."
Yeah, just go away, slip into the night. Thank you very much. But you mentioned Gary Stead doesn't get much wrong. He just came out today and said they got the call on the pitch in their own country. They got that wrong. He says, if we knew it was going to spin, not so much the spin but the bounce, then Santner would have played. We got that wrong. We put our hand up. So
I didn't know even that.
Even at home, it's a challenge. I think Australia knows what every pitch is down to the tee, and even the World Cup we talked about. This pitch has got red soil. This one's got black soil. We know how it's going to move. So some analysis and understanding of conditions is something that I think Gary Stead should take a bit more seriously.
That's interesting. I missed that actually, but as it happens, yesterday afternoon I was chatting to my mate John Morrison, who played 20-odd tests for New Zealand, scored the last New Zealander to score 100 at the SCG actually in a test, so that gives you an idea how badly we've done at the SCG in the last 30 years. But he was, and also he played, I don't know, well over 100 matches for Wellington, coached Wellington, captain Wellington. He said to me, he says, the Basin Reserve always spins. Always. So yeah, it's bizarre. I mean, so that's on the one hand, but the other thing is that New Zealand sort of has a small problem, that, if you can call it that, is that they've got Rachin Ravindra, who's a good left arm spin bowler, and then Glenn Phillips, as he showed in this match, he can also bowl spin. So in the backs of their minds are probably thinking, oh, do we really need to pick let's say a frontline spinner or a specialist spinner? And if in doubt, go with 4 quicks. And of course, whereas on the Australian side, it doesn't matter where they're playing, Nathan Lyon will always play. So, yeah, I just think New Zealand's got this real reluctance to pick spin bowlers, especially at home. And just interesting, something I suspect you wouldn't be aware of, Rob. But there's probably our leading the left arm spin bowler at least is Ajaz Patel. Of course, he took 10 wickets in India in an innings, 14 in the match about 4 years ago. He took 7 for 78 for Northern Districts, for Central Districts against Northern Districts during this weekend. But yeah, no signs for a test recall for him. But let's look at this match. Where I'd like to start off with is, with the Australian first innings, of course, a sublime 174 not out by Cameron Green, and it actually matched a score that Jeremy Coney got in 1985 at at the base reserve. I was there then. That was against Australia as well, actually.
Yep.
And Cameron Green's knock was, the difference, but basically it won them the match pretty much. Australia, that is. But what do you make of Cameron Green as a player? I mean, I know it's easy to talk about someone that's just scored 174, but it wasn't that long ago where he was a borderline selection at number 6. To get a knock like that at number 4, it's kind of incredible. But do you think he's going to become more of a batsman because with this move to number 4 and less a bowler?
I think so. I mean, if you look at some of the history of Sheffield Shield for him, he's played number 4 quite often. I guess the mindset between number 4 and say number 6 is at number 4 you're still, with the premier batsman around you, you're still expected to sit there and produce a long innings. Maybe at number 6 you're batting with not just number 5 or 4 above you, but 7, 8, 9 below you, and you've got to play a different role. And that usually means you've got to start to invent new shots and create the runs and be the leader alongside a tail ender. And we saw all of those things at once with Cam Green in this innings, right? He had to play alongside some top end players, but then he had this incredible partnership with Josh Hazlewood down the bottom. So he's become a bit of a chameleon in a way. I'm sure he'd love to settle down number 4 and stay there. And I think we'd all like to see it as well. And Steve Smith moved from that position to help him get into the side. So I think you saw in the first innings really his true self. If you look at the highlights on YouTube, for example, of Cam Green at Shield cricket, they are absolutely vicious and dominant. And I think that's the game he loves to play, which is what he did at the back half of his innings, was really go after it because he kind of had to, but also that's his natural game after this tentative first year or two, in the last 2 years at least, of his test career. So he looks more natural, he looks more settled, he looks like he's going to be a fixture for a while there, like Rachin Ravindra does as well. And it's exciting when all the other batsmen around them are probably not in great form. I mean, the math says that Cameron Green's innings was the difference in the game, but the fact that he had that really long partnership with Hazlewood and Mitch Marsh hit 40 as well, and that must have somewhat broken the spirit a little bit of the Kiwis to say, we can't finish this guys off. And they got an extra 80 runs on the second day, I think, when they probably shouldn't have got them. So that was pretty amazing to see. I'm not sure what you thought about him and what he looks like versus Ravindra and those two guys playing each other, hopefully with more tests or more games. Exciting for the future.
Yeah, it's definitely exciting for as you say, just with generational change. And you talk about Kane Williamson maybe not having that many more years left, to have Ravindra come in at age 24. And I've also got no doubt, by the way, that Glenn Phillips will move up the order over time. He's batting number 7 at the moment. He probably should be batting 6 because Tom Blundell's form hasn't been that great this summer. But I can imagine him moving up the order. In fact, I guess Mitchell might not be that far behind Williamson when he eventually gives it up. But, you could imagine Ravindra moving up to 3, Mitchell up to 4, Phillips up to 5, something like that. So it's looking good for New Zealand as well. But I just want to ask you something about that second day, Rob, or the second morning. And it went on to after lunch, actually, that partnership with Hazlewood. Breaking New Zealand's hearts again, a bit like Glenn McGrath and Jason Gillespie did at Brisbane when I was there in 2004, although I think that was more of them just whacking it around and having fun, whereas this was much more Hazlewood providing the support to Cameron Green. But just New Zealand's bowling tactics, because I remember last summer against England on that last day, and New Zealand ended up winning by 1 run. But Ben Foakes was batting with the tail, and we just had all our guys on the boundary, and we just kept bowling short stuff to him, and he just kept putting us away, Not on every ball, and in this case, I think Green hit 5 sixes over mid-wicket, basically, or over the leg side boundary. Just the tactics to bowl short to him, it just seemed bizarre. What was your read of that situation?
Yeah, I did see that. I thought, well, you're bowling sort of short spin that's going to bounce up about his hip high, that he's got these enormous arms and this big strength that's just going to pound it over the boundary. Then it's I wouldn't say, is it a large ground? It's not really, right?
No.
So he's got the leverage to kind of get it going and over the fence. And so I found that a bit strange. I think you'd surely want to play to his historic weaknesses or this temptation you want to give him outside off. But yeah, it seemed to play into his hands pretty well. And as you say, he was just putting them away. And I guess every time he did it, he got a bit more confident, found his spot, maybe got a bit more comfortable with the condition of the ball. Maybe the ball wasn't degrading, the spin was playing into his hands. So I found it a bit strange. And you'd think you'd be throwing all kinds of different things up to try and upset him and get him out of his rhythm. Pitch it short, bowl it a bit further back. Aim for vary your length a bit more. But that didn't seem to happen.
Yeah. Oh well, let's just looking at that New Zealand first innings, and after Australia had posted that first innings total of 383, it was in the end. They should have been out for around 300, but
yeah.
So that Aussie is up to a good start. But bearing in mind Australia were put into bat as well. New Zealand won the toss, of course. But in New Zealand, all out 179. But the worrying thing really was the fact that we slipped to 29 for 5, which included that absolutely comical run out of Kane Williamson. But that what a reply Australia came up with the ball to have New Zealand in that sort of position. At 29 for 5, and it was really only Glenn Phillips and Tom Blundell did fairly well, with Phillips top scoring with 71, and then later on Matt Henry got 42 for New Zealand to get through to 179. But the interesting point for me in the first innings, Rob, was the fact that 4 of New Zealand's wickets fell to Nathan Lyon's off spin. He was a little bit expensive, 4 for 43 off 8 overs, but he's just so effective, particularly to tail lower order batsmen. So he got Blundell, Scott Kuggeleijn, who was batting 8, Henry, who was batting 9, and Southey, who was batting 10. He went on to take his 6 wickets in the second innings as well. But the thing I'm just amazed with Lyon, and I remember Kevin Peterson saying, "Look, this guy's just not that good. Just whack him." Well, we're not all as good as Kevin Peterson. But what a bowler he's become. And I think he went past Courtney Walsh's wicket tally during this match as well. Over 500 wickets now. He's just sensational, really, isn't he, for a captain to be able to call on?
I've watched him obviously over the years so much. 128 tests now he's played. He's played 100 in a row before he got injured. And I always wonder how he manages to conjure up and manufacture these sort of 2, 3, 4 wickets in every single country, like in every single condition. It doesn't really matter if he's on a dusty old pitch in South Africa or he's in a green top like there in New Zealand or in England, or obviously all the Aussie ones. It seems to find a way, and it's obviously technique and skill and conditions, but it's probably also a bit of sort of really smart tactics and gamesmanship, and he's sort of got the complete game when you really go under it. It's not bombastic, or it's not it sort of creeps up on you, and all of a sudden he's sort of ripped through the heart of the team. So getting 10 wickets in this game is pretty amazing. And when you think that Stark and Cummins each got 1 wicket for the whole match, so it wasn't just the standard spread across these bowlers. It was really a spinning exhibition alongside Hazelwood playing set of second fiddle, which you wonder why New Zealand didn't do the same. So it's been amazing to see him bowl. I know Cummins has said that he'd be happy to see him play on beyond his 40s, past 2027. He's in good condition. He still delivers. So I'm very happy he's playing in our team, and he's the 3rd most wickets for an Australian now. So he's really very high up in the pantheon of Australian cricket now in terms of bowling.
He's been super impressive, that's for sure. And I guess the New Zealand management and the captain Tim Southey would have been looking on and thinking, "Wow, these spinners just run through us." And then, to New Zealand's credit, they fought back in the Aussie second innings, bowling Australia out for 164. And interestingly, Glenn Phillips, who didn't bowl a single ball in the first innings, New Zealand's off spinner. They call him a part-time off spinner, but I know he takes his bowling very seriously. 5 for 45 off 16 overs. And yeah, as I say, that he's not what you'd call a frontline spinner, but he's a very good bowler. Ravindra only bowled one over, but yeah, Phillips amazing. So yeah, it's just crazy, isn't it, that the spin had such a big effect on the game, and of course in New Zealand's second innings, Lyon took another 6 wickets. Yeah,
Well,
I was super impressed with Phillips as well.
I agree. He's taken 16 wickets in his whole career. So all of a sudden he's had a bit of a standout performance. Maybe the conditions suited him, and maybe the ball felt good in his hands, and the Aussies probably didn't think that they would get what they got from him. So, yeah, that was good to see. I think it's exciting. He was really happy, as you could tell, and that's always good to see someone get a breakthrough like that. We've had that. You've had people like Travis Head and Marnus all of a sudden pop up and make an impact. Michael Clark used to do it back in the day. Had these little cameos of breaking partnerships or making moments happen. That was always exciting to see. So I think that helped spice up the game, to be honest. It kept it interesting from an Aussie perspective, where our score was 164 all out in that second innings, and all of a sudden the game was much closer than it appeared. And there was a lot of hope from New Zealand in that fourth innings at the end of the third day, I guess it was. And they were still sort of neck and neck when you saw the polls on the likes of Cricket Info about can New Zealand run this down. It was about 50-50. I'm not sure if you felt that, Andy, about your confidence in the last innings of getting that total.
Well, it would have helped if Will Young hadn't got out to the part-time spin of Travis Head for a start. And of course, Lyon took the wickets of Latham and Williamson on the first day. So, chasing that score of over 300, losing 3 wickets before stumps on day 3 was hardly ideal. But Ravindra was not out overnight on 56, and Mitchell was with him. I forget what his overnight score was. But with Ravindra being in the form that he's in, and Mitchell being the player he is, I thought New Zealand still had a relatively good chance, with Blundell and Phillips still to come, of course. But sadly, from New Zealand's perspective, and for all the people that turned up for day 4, including my mate Vaughan, who got a ticket on the morning of the match, it was all over by lunchtime. So, we collapsed for 196 not out, and for New Zealand not to go past 202 innings, however you want to describe it, is pretty woeful, really. And there's so much talk in the various groups on Facebook and Twitter, and that New Zealand just gets stage fright against Australia, and of course they'll never admit that. But 2 scores of under 200. Very disappointing, in what should have been the best batting conditions of the whole match. On day four of at the Basin Reserve, it's a good batting wicket. So yeah, very disappointing by New Zealand. As I say, Lyon 6 for 65 in the second innings off 27 overs, bowling first change. We just didn't have any answers, sadly.
Can we also maybe, I'm not sure if you end the coverage of this test or talk about Kane Williamson, who maybe had a bit of a false positive from the South Africa series, right? He got four centuries, I think, in those games,
three,
yeah, and obviously was plundering runs at home soil again, and all of a sudden he's coming to this game, and I guess had a bad start, and then that sort of comical collision you talked about. How is he thinking? Is he going to recover? Is he someone who will just go through this, or will this affect him in this next test?
Hard to say. I mean, just just on that run out, I didn't see it live, but the clip was doing the rounds on Twitter. And I watched it a few times. Initially, I thought, okay, Phillips is ball watching. But then I thought, hold on a sec. Maybe he was ball watching. Sorry, not Phillips, Will Young, I mean.
Yes.
Maybe he was ball watching. But so Mitchell Starc was bowling over the wicket, so left arm over the wicket. So Will Young was standing on the off side of the field. Williamson, I watched this a few times. Williamson had a clear view of what was in front of him. First of all, there was Starc in front of him, plus there was Will Young in front of him, yet he still ran down the offside of the wicket. And it's a bit like, if there's a collision coming up when you're driving a car, what do? You avoid the collision at all costs, right? Even if it might take a risk of something else happening. But he could have avoided that so easily. I just thought, what a waste. Um, but then in the second innings, yeah, caught at leg slip by Steve Smith off Nathan Lyon for 9. But yeah, I think you're talking about not just Williamson, but overall the difference in quality of attack. I mean, it's widely known that the South African side that played in those two matches in February was nowhere near their top lineup, and there's a lot of talk about Williamson online being a minnow basher, but the reality is his record against Australia and England and India is nowhere near as good as his record against all the other sides. I think he averages like 38 or something against those sides.
Right.
So yeah, possibly a false positive. And for us to win that match, chasing 300, we really needed runs from Williamson. So it was very disappointing. That's all I can say. But no, he's a professional player. He's New Zealand's greatest ever batsman by a mile, possibly even our best player of all time. I mean, it's really only Richard Hadley who's the competitor for that title.
Mm.
I just hope that Williamson comes good in Christchurch, and he's got a what should I say a track record of doing that, including that century he got against Sri Lanka last year to get us home for victory off the last ball of the match. So I think I don't think there's too many problems with Williamson, but if he has a failure in this next test, then questions will be asked.
So on that, if we think about, I mean, Christchurch is coming up in a few days. Tell us what the pitch is like, the conditions are like there. What are you expecting? What sort of toss is it to win? How would you preview that test?
Well, I don't really like to comment too much on pitches that I haven't seen, and even if I have seen them, I'm not really good enough to really tell you too much about them anyway. But the one thing you can say is that I imagine New Zealand will produce some sort of wicket that was fairly similar to the Wellington one.
Right.
And I know that that comes with risks, right? Because Australia's got a reasonably good bowling attack, Hazelwood, Stark, and Cummins. But that's our best chance. We've got we've got Matt Henry, who's in really good form, and traditionally, New Zealand seamers in New Zealand have taken the wickets. But having said that, I suspect what New Zealand will want will be a wicket that's a very good batting wicket. Then you aim to take the bowlers out of the equation. And of course they can't have one that becomes a turning wicket, because then Lyon will be the force that he was in this Test match. So I suspect, as happened last year against Sri Lanka, a match that goes right down to the 5th day. So a good batting surface basically is what I expect to happen. And then they just got to back the batsmen to get the runs. Tom Latham's due to score runs. He's scored nothing for ages. Williamson, as we mentioned, there's also whether Devon Conway comes back into the side or not after being ruled out of the first test. That's a huge blow not to have him in the team. So hopefully he comes back. Mitchell's due runs, Blundell's due runs. So yeah, I think just a good all-round batting wicket will be what they go for, Rob. But there's one other thing I wanted to touch on. And we talked at the start of the show about Neil Wagner not being in the side and having retired. But the guy who's in really bad form with the ball at the moment is Tim Southey, who's the captain, obviously. So, very unlikely he's going to drop himself. But I read some stat the other day. I think he's got 6 wickets this summer at like some average of 120, or maybe I'm doing him a disservice, but bad, basically. Went wicketless in the first innings at the Basin Reserve, and he got 2 in the second innings. One was a chop, one was batsman chopped on, and the other was a strangle down the leg side. So yeah, his form's a real worry, and he's down on pace by all accounts. Averaging in sort of 126, 127, which is exactly the reason why Wagner got dropped, by the way. because his pace was so far down.
Hmm.
So yeah, I'm very worried about Southey, and it just feels like Matt Henry, so much relies on him these days. So yeah, that's a concern, and I know this is a bit of a controversial opinion, but I really wish they would just call Trent Bolt and say, Trent, can you come and play this match for us, please?
Yeah, well, he was busy at the wedding of Ambani's son. I think I saw him over there, but I, I wonder what's going on with Southey. He's obviously been this sort of cornerstone of the pace attack for a long time, and he seems to be there and thereabout all the time. But as you say, if he's not getting any wickets, it's problematic. I think he's got his 100th test coming up in this next test.
Yes.
So you wonder if that's a milestone. He's obviously been there forever. He's ever present. But if you're not taking wickets, if you're not taking wickets, then what else are you doing? Are you applying pressure? Are you reducing the turnover of the strike? Are you putting fear into the batsman? Are you making the batsman change the behaviour? Is he doing those things, or is he just sort of holding up an end for someone else to then have to go and make something happen down the other end? So I guess there'll be questions asked, and this has been the thing out of this test and this summer for me, for the Aussies as well. All of a sudden, these stories have exposed some of the frailties or the lack of form across the board. It's been a bit strange. So I expect Southey to have to make a performance happen, or else he'll be under a lot of scrutiny.
Yes, well, and I guess the other thing too, though, Rob, is that this is the last test that New Zealand plays for quite some time. I think the next test's maybe September against Afghanistan, and then they go to Sri Lanka. I think that's right. So sometimes being out of form at the end of a season is not such a bad thing, because there's still a long time until the next side gets selected. But I guess he's got credit in the bank. You say it's his 100th test, which is absolutely right. He made his debut for New Zealand back in 2008 when he was an 18-year-old against England. So he's been in the side for 16 years and only played 100 tests. It's kind of astonishing, really.
Yeah.
You look at someone like Alistair Cook or Joe Root, and how quickly they rack up 100 tests. But yeah, his form's definitely a worry. His captaincy is a bit of a worry too, to be honest. I mean, like I say, that those tactics against Cam Green on that second morning was so reminiscent of what they did against Ben Foakes last year and almost lost. I know it was a great finish in the end, but yeah, so I'm a bit concerned about that as well. But yeah, Ben Sears has been called into the squad. I've never seen him play. He's from Wellington. By all accounts, he's quite quick, so I suspect he'll get a go. Probably at the expense of Kugelheim, I'm guessing, because I've got no doubt they're going to bring a spinner in for this next match. It'd be absolutely mad not to play Mitchell Santner, although I'm not sure he should be in the side, but he is in the side, and he's a very good batsman too, Santner. He's got a first class average of 46, so yeah, we'll wait and see, and let's hope Southey can do something useful with the ball. But just before we finish up this show today, Rob, we've got the final India against England test match in Dharamshala. It starts on the 7th, so just a few days away now. I read the other day that the temperature during the day has been like 5 degrees or something, which may be a little bit unseasonal given that it's March in Dharamshala now. But I've been there actually a number of years ago. It's fairly high up. I went in April and it was very lovely in April. But it sounds like those conditions could suit England better than India.
I think so. I saw some photographs and some footage from someone where it was pouring as rain. It was very cold, and it may transpire that it won't be the dry, harsh conditions that India obviously used to and England have to adapt to. So I'm not sure it'll start turning like Lords, but maybe it'll start swinging around like Lords, like it does at Lords. But I wonder if it'll just give England a sniff. It might affect. I'm not sure it'll affect the selection per se, but certainly the tactics will be interesting to see, and maybe the way they manage the bowlers through the game. But it's going to be exciting. I think it's imagine England coming away with a 3-2 series loss as opposed to a 4-1, how different that would feel for them. They would feel like they're sort of vindicated some of their decisions, the way they play.
Mate, if that happens, Michael Vaughan is going to go absolutely mad. Did you read that quote from him the other day? He said
No.
England's been the better team throughout the series. That's what he said. I could not believe. I mean, unless someone was just, was a wind up. But just truly bizarre. And yeah, if England come out of this at 3-2, well, we know what all the Aussies will say. Oh, they had a moral victory, obviously.
Yes. Yes.
But yeah, it would be a great outcome. And I guess it's also significant for Johnny Bairstow. It's going to be his 100th Test. Brendan McCullum's already said that he'll definitely play. So that there is a really good opportunity to come out with a decent result. And 3-2. Not that many teams go to India and only lose 3-2. Well, most of them don't play 5 tests. That's why. But yeah, they've definitely got a chance. The selection's going to be very interesting, though. Ollie Robinson in the last match, he came under a lot of scrutiny for his pace being down and all this sort of stuff. And Brendan McCullum said, look, he actually hurt his back when he was batting, and that was a contributing factor. But he's been slammed online, not just by fans but journalists as well. So whether he gets another go, I suspect he will, and I suspect they might leave Anderson out actually and bring Wood back. I would never leave Anderson out of the side. It's their best bowler by a mile. But yeah, the selection will be interesting. But just on Robinson, when I watch him bowl, he just ambles up to the crease, so slowly. It's like, you look at a guy like Stuart Broad, he literally charges in. So Robinson's obviously strong, or he must have really muscular shoulders or something to be able to bowl at the pace that he does. But he was down on pace, bowling around 125, and he gets criticised by his lack of fitness most of the time. But I just look at him and think, come on, man, you must be able to bowl quicker than that.
Well, I just wonder if he's just that sort of prone to injury kind of guy, and he has to manage his load a bit. He comes in and out of the team. I think he's been doing that for a while, right? My memory of him playing against Australia is he wouldn't play in all the tests. I'd usually just change him around anyway, but he certainly seems the sort of bowler who could get a lot more out of himself than he does, and he seems to, I don't know, be a bit casual about the whole thing. Even when he's batting, he's a little bit sort of casual, and obviously his comments in the media, and he's happy to play a bit more of a laconic character as opposed to someone intense. Like I guess Joe Root or others, but maybe let's see. Is he a wild card, or does he need to be that stalwart who, again, holds down an end and actually starts to play a responsible role? I'm not sure he can do both those things at once.
Yeah, well, I mean, he has been in and out of the team for a while. His first summer, which was about 2019, I think, or maybe 2020. Prior to that last Ashes tour, he was great, and his Test record's still sensational. He's taking his wickets at 22, so he's not a bad bowler. But yeah, he might be one of those guys that needs a run in the side for an extended period of time, and maybe a bit like Chris Wokes, maybe away conditions just don't suit him. But yeah, he just does come across as a bit of a, I don't know, an oddball, let's call it that. And he got criticised for exactly the reason that you said. He's just way too casual in the field. Then he drops a crucial catch. So maybe he's just a bit of a target, and not helped by some of the things he says in the media as well. So I'm probably with you on that one. But yeah, so we've got that to look forward to. One more Test match. And then, of course, we're pretty much into the IPL season coming up soon. So I guess for yours and my perspectives, Rob, being a Kiwi and an Aussie, here on the World Cricket Show, we've been able to talk about our own teams, but we're going to be talking about something else in future episodes. So anyway, that's all we've got time for today here on the World Cricket Show on Global Cricket Radio. We'll catch you the same time. In fact, no, we won't catch you the same time next week. And there's a reason why. I live in Bali, and I don't know if you know this, Rob, but they call it Nyepi, which means silent day. The whole island closes. No flights
Nice.
in and out. You can't go out of your house. No internet. So we won't be having a show this time next week. We'll have it on another day at another time. We'll catch you then.